why she was wearing a red dress on a Tuesday night, and she told him she had a dinner with her boss. For 11 years, Marcus had been the kind of husband who filled gas tanks before they hit empty, and remembered which brand of coffee she liked, and never once complained about the nights she worked late. He was a structural engineer at a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio. The kind of man who found load errors in blueprints that 3 other engineers had already cleared. He drove a 2015 Chevy Silverado with a cracked dashboard panel he kept meaning to replace. He coached Nadia's Saturday soccer team. He made dinner on Thursdays. He had not asked for much and had not missed much. For 11 years, he had believed that was enough. She had no idea that the firm handling her boss's development project, the one her boss had been courting for 8 months, was a subsidiary of the consulting group Marcus's uncle had transferred to him 2 years earlier in a document she had never thought to read. What she had planned for Thursday night at the Meridian Hotel's private dining room would cost her far more than she had ever imagined spending. Because tomorrow's story is one you're going to want to be there for. The alarm went off at 5:12 a.m. On the morning of the last ordinary Tuesday Marcus Webb would have for a long time. He sat up in the dark and listened for a moment. The house was still. Nadia's door was closed. She wouldn't be up for another hour. He swung his feet to the floor, sat on the edge of the bed for 3 seconds the way he always did, then stood. He had done this every weekday for 11 years. The sequence never varied. Feet on the floor, 3 seconds, stand, bathroom, coffee, then the rest. He filled the percolator in the kitchen and leaned against the counter while it ran. Through the window over the sink, the sky was still dark. A thin gray line beginning at the far edge of the neighborhood where the water tower stood. He could see the tower from here. He had been able to see it from this window for 6 years, since they bought the house, and he had never once thought about it consciously until this morning, standing in the quiet kitchen, watching the coffee go through its cycle. Renee was still asleep. He poured his coffee into the steel thermos, black, no sugar, lid screwed tight, and pulled on his Carhartt jacket from the hook by the back door. His work bag was already packed. He'd done it the night before, the way he always did. Sight notebook in the inside pocket. Laptop zipped into the front compartment. He picked up his keys from the bowl on the counter and went out to the driveway. The Silverado started on the first turn. He let it idle for 90 seconds in the cold. It was February. The windshield fogged, then cleared as the defrost ran. He backed out onto the street and drove toward the bridge. The Walcott project was in its 8th month. A 6-story mixed-use development on the east side of the river. The kind of job that required someone on site before the foreman arrived. Marcus had been logging that extra time without billing it. He did it because problems caught at 7 a.m., stayed problems, and problems caught at 5:30 a.m. became notes on a clipboard. He preferred notes on a clipboard. He parked in the gravel staging area and walked the perimeter with his flashlight, the same route he walked every morning. South end to north end. Foundation forms, rebar lines, anchor bolt spacing. He had caught a column error 3 weeks earlier that would have required a full pour removal if it had been missed. He'd written it up in 6 sentences, left it on the foreman's board, and said nothing else about it. The foreman had thanked him once, and they hadn't mentioned it since. That was how it worked. By 9 a.m., the crew was running, and Marcus was in the site trailer reviewing structural drawings with the project engineer, a young man named Bryce, who had been doing this for 3 years and was good at it. Marcus made 3 notes in the margin of the drawings, circled one section near the elevator shaft, and handed the page back. "Run this by the architect before we pour," he said. "Sure," Bryce said. "You think there's a problem?" "I think it's worth confirming." He didn't explain further. There was nothing else to explain. He ate lunch in the Silverado, a sandwich Renee had not made, a sandwich he had made himself the night before, and wrapped in foil, and read through the structural code updates the firm had sent 2 weeks ago that he still hadn't finished. He had 17 pages left. He got through 9 of them before he needed to be back on the floor. By 4:45 p.m., he was heading home. He called his uncle Clifton on the way. Clifton was 74 and lived in a house in Gahanna that was older than their entire family's presence in Ohio, a wide colonial with dark wood floors and a porch that wrapped all the way around the back. Clifton had built 4 things in his life: a family, a reputation, a real estate portfolio, and a consulting group that operated through a holding company none of the wrong people had ever thought to look for. He had transferred controlling interest in the holding company to Marcus 2 years ago, at a dinner at that same house, on a Tuesday night, not unlike this one. While they ate pot roast and his aunt complained about the weather. "Just checking in," Marcus said. "I know you're just checking in," Clifton said. "You only call on the way home when something's on your mind." "Everything's fine." "I didn't say it wasn't." A pause. "Come by Saturday. I want to show you the revised proposal on the east parcel." "Renee has something on Saturday." "Then come without Renee." They hung up. Marcus drove the rest of the way home, in quiet. The house was lit up when he pulled in. He could see the kitchen light and the bedroom light and something moving in the foyer window. He sat in the driveway for a moment with the engine off, the tick of cooling metal settling around him, then went inside. She was in the bedroom. He heard the hairdryer. He set his bag down in the hallway and checked the mail on the counter. 2 bills, a catalog, a card from the school about Nadia's spring fundraiser. He set them in the tray and went to the doorway of the bedroom. Renee was in the red dress. He stood there for a moment. The dress was not new. She'd had it for 2 years. But it was not a weeknight dress. It was not a Tuesday dress. It was the kind of dress she wore to the holiday party and to her college roommate's wedding and to the dinner they'd had with the Bergerons last spring, the one she had spent a week looking forward to. "Hey," he said. She looked up at him in the mirror, holding an earring to her left ear. "Hey, dinner's on the stove. Just needs to be heated." "You going somewhere?" "Dinner with my boss." She turned back to the mirror, pressed the earring in. "Michael's in town this week. Flew in from Chicago, taking the whole Columbus team out. I told you about this." He thought about whether she had. He didn't think she had. He was not the kind of man who forgot things like that. "When did you tell me?" he said. "Last week sometime." She moved to the closet. "I know it's short notice. It shouldn't go too late." He went to the kitchen and heated the pasta she'd left on the stove. He ate standing up at the counter, watching the backyard through the window. The patio light was on. He'd replaced that bulb himself 2 weeks ago, a Wednesday evening, while Renee was at her sister's. He remembered caulking the edges of the fixture while he was up there because the seal had started to go. He heard her heels on the hardwood. "I won't be late," she said from the hallway. 8:39. "Which restaurant?" he said. A pause. "The Meridian. They've got a private room there." "That's nice." "Marcus." Her tone was careful in a way he noticed, but couldn't immediately place. "It's just a dinner." "I didn't say it wasn't." She left at 6:40 p.m. He cleaned the pan. He put Nadia to bed at 8:15. He sat in the living room with the lights low and the television off, and thought about the word sometimes. She had said Michael flew in from Chicago and was taking the whole Columbus team out. He thought about the Columbus team. Renee had told him about them over the years. Janelle, who handled media relations, and Troy, and a woman named Priya who had started in the fall. He had met two of them at a company picnic the previous June. He had never heard her mention the Meridian. He went to bed at 10:30. She came in at 11:48. He heard the door, heard her heels on the hallway floor, heard the bathroom sink. He kept his eyes closed and breathed evenly. She slid into bed without turning on the lamp. He lay there in the dark for a long time. It was not the dress. It was not the restaurant. It was the pause before she said Michael's name. He had been an engineer for 16 years. He understood the weight of small structural deviations. He understood that the things that collapsed first were rarely the things anyone had been watching. He said nothing. He did not raise his voice. He closed his eyes and waited for sleep. And when sleep came, he met it without fighting. The next morning, he drove to the site the same route he always drove. On Thursday, after the crew broke for lunch, he sat in the site trailer with his laptop open and thought about what he knew. He knew she was lying. He had known it the moment she said Michael's name with that particular careful pause. The same pause she used when she was composing something, which was what she did when she was uncertain about the ground beneath her. He had learned that about her in the first year of their marriage, and had spent the next 10 watching it and saying nothing, because he had believed, until recently, that the occasions that required it were small. He thought about the phrase the whole Columbus team. He opened his browser and pulled up the Meridian Hotel's website. He found the private dining room rates and the reservation form. He thought about who reserved a private room for a business dinner on a Tuesday night in February. He thought about 12 people versus 4. He thought about the dress. He closed the browser. He made 2 phone calls. The first was to his attorney, a woman named Greta Solomon, who had an office on High Street and who handled matters of corporate law and, on occasion, personal legal affairs for men who did not make noise about the things they needed to handle. He had used Greta once, 4 years ago, for a contract dispute on a consulting arrangement. She remembered him. "I need to understand something about asset disclosure," he said. "If a separation were to happen, hypothetically." "Come in," she said. "Bring what you have." The second call was to his friend and former college roommate Derek, who worked in private security and investigations and who, more relevantly, had an instinct for finding out exactly what people were doing when they didn't think anyone was looking. "Need a favor," Marcus said. "What kind?" "Confirm or deny, that's all." "Give me a name and a location." He gave him both. He drove to Greta Solomon's office on Friday afternoon. Her building was glass and dark oak and quiet the way buildings are when everyone inside is focused. She met him in the conference room, a carafe of water between them, a legal pad in front of her. He laid out what he knew in the order in which he knew it. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she set her pen down. "Tell me about the consulting group," she said. He told her. He told her about Clifton, about the holding company, about the transfer, about the East Side parcels that had been quietly accumulating value for 9 years, about the development proposals that 3 downtown investors had been circling for the last 14 months. He told her about his salary, which was comfortable, and about the assets attached to the holding company, which were not, which were in the range of $4 to $5 million, depending on the quarter and the valuations, which Renee had never asked about, and which Marcus had never volunteered. Not because he was hiding anything, but because she had never thought to ask. Greta looked at him for a moment. "She doesn't know," she said. "She doesn't know." Greta wrote 2 things on her legal pad and underlined one of them. "Then we have a significant amount of room to work with," she said. The question is what you want. He thought about the dress. He thought about the pause before the name. I want the truth on the table, he said. After that, we'll see. On Saturday morning, Derek called. Marcus was in the backyard with Nadia, pushing her on the swing he'd installed himself 2 summers ago. The hardware lag-bolted into the crossbar with a torque rating 2.5 times the required spec, because that was how he did things. He answered on the second ring. Her boss's name isn't Michael, Derek said. His name is Ryan Solis. He's a regional director at her firm. He flew in from Chicago, not for the Columbus team. He flew in for her. Marcus pushed the swing once more and let it glide. How long? He said. From what I can find, at least 7 months. He thanked Derek and put the phone in his pocket. Nadia was asking him to push her again. He pushed her again. The yard was quiet, except for the creak of the rope and the sound of her laughing as she went up. He made breakfast, helped Nadia with her reading homework, and then drove to Clifton's house in Gahanna at 2 o'clock as planned. Clifton was in his study when Marcus arrived, a wide room with dark wood paneling and worn leather chairs that had been there since before Marcus was born. The proposal for the East parcel was on the desk, 12 pages, tabbed. Clifton poured coffee from a thermos he kept on the credenza. You look like someone who's been thinking for 3 days, Clifton said. Close enough. He told him everything. Clifton listened the way he always listened, completely still. His eyes on Marcus, no expression changing until Marcus had finished. Then he sat back in the leather chair that creaked the same way it always had. She doesn't know about the holding company, Clifton said. No. Have you spoken to an attorney? Greta Solomon, Friday. Clifton nodded slowly. He had known Greta's name for 20 years, which was not surprising because Clifton knew most names worth knowing. What did she say? That we have room. Clifton was quiet for a long moment, looking at the proposal on the desk. Outside, the wind moved through the trees at the back of the yard, bare branches in February light, thin and precise as a blueprint. Your grandfather bought that first parcel in 1971, Clifton said quietly. 5 acres off the river. People told him it was floodplain. He looked at the elevation data himself and disagreed. He was right. Everything else followed from that. He paused. This family doesn't build things to hand them to people who weren't paying attention. No, Marcus said. It doesn't. He drove home. He made dinner. He helped Nadia with her bath and read her the book she was working through, 3 chapters, until she was asleep. He washed the dishes. He went to bed at 10:15. Renee came home at 10:52. He was still awake. He listened to the pattern of her movement through the house, the door, the kitchen, the hallway, the bathroom sink. He thought about 7 months. He thought about the Columbus team. He kept his breathing even and said nothing. On Monday morning, Greta Solomon filed for a court-ordered discovery process on the basis of potential marital asset fraud. She also placed a protective hold on the holding company's assets through Clifton's attorney, which meant that any attempt to claim or contest those assets during a marital proceeding would require an evidentiary hearing. The holding company's assets were, as of the most recent valuation, $4.7 million. The call came to Marcus's phone at 2:19 p.m. on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the filing. He was on site at the Walcott project, standing at the south end of the foundation with Bryce, reviewing the elevator shaft clearances. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He held up a finger to Bryce and stepped away. It was Renee. He answered. What is this? She said. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness was the kind that required effort, and he recognized the effort. I just got a call from an attorney. Marcus, what is going on? I think you know, he said. A silence. I don't understand what you're... Renee. His voice was quiet and even. I know about Ryan. I know it's been 7 months. I know the dinner on Tuesday wasn't a work dinner. I know you didn't tell me about Michael because there is no Michael. His name is Ryan Solis, and he flew in from Chicago because you asked him to. The silence that followed was different from the first one. I'm not here to have a fight, Marcus said. I'm not going to raise my voice or say things I'll regret. I wanted you to know that I know, and I wanted you to know that I've already spoken to an attorney. The rest will proceed the way it proceeds. Marcus, I'll sleep in the guest room until we've figured out the next steps. We don't need to do this tonight. He ended the call. He stood for a moment in the cold with the sound of the crew working behind him and the sky going pale gray over the river. He put the phone in his jacket pocket and walked back to Bryce and pointed at the elevator shaft clearance drawing. That margin needs to be confirmed before we frame, he said. Let's get the architect on a call this afternoon. Sure, Bryce said. Thank you. He put his eyes back on the drawings and thought about nothing else for the next hour. The first settlement meeting took place 6 weeks later on the 22nd floor of a building on East Broad Street. A conference room with windows that looked out over the river and the east side of the city. Greta sat beside him. Renee's attorney, a man named Cassidy, who had done this work for 20 years and had the careful manner of someone who weighed words before spending them, sat across the table. Renee sat beside Cassidy and did not look at Marcus when he entered. Cassidy opened his folder. He spoke calmly's account, the house, the retirement accounts, the value of Renee's 401k, and the equity in the property. He spoke for 9 minutes. He was thorough and precise and covered everything a careful attorney covers when he is certain he has mapped the full territory. When he finished, Greta opened her own folder. Thank you, she said pleasantly. I want to make sure we have the complete picture. She produced the first document, the trust instrument that Clifton had drawn up in 2022, transferring controlling interest in the Webb Family Holdings Group to Marcus. She laid it flat on the table. She produced the second document, the current valuation report, prepared 2 weeks earlier by an independent commercial appraiser, placing the total asset value at $4.9 million. She placed it beside the first. Cassidy looked at the documents. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Marcus. These assets were not disclosed, he said. These assets predate the marriage, Greta said. The trust instrument was established using holdings that were transferred generationally, beginning in 1971. Mr. Webb received controlling interest through a legitimate interfamily transfer 2 years ago. None of this constitutes marital property under Ohio law. Cassidy read the documents. He read them carefully, line by line, the way a man reads something when he needs to find a problem with it and cannot. For the first time since they sat down, Renee looked at Marcus. He met her eyes. She had built a picture of this marriage and had lived inside it and had never once thought to ask what else there was. She had looked at the Silverado with the cracked dashboard panel and the Carhartt jacket and the Thursday dinners and the years of coaching Saturday soccer, and had decided that she knew the full dimensions of him. She had decided, somewhere in the last 7 months, that what she was leaving behind was small enough to leave. He did not say any of this. He sat with his hands flat on the table and his face composed, and let Greta do what she was there to do. There is also the matter of the East Side parcels, Greta said. She produced the third document, an 8-page development proposal. Mr. Webb's group controls approximately 6.4 acres of land adjacent to the proposed Eastgate Corridor project. 3 downtown development firms have been in active negotiations with the group for the last 14 months regarding access rights and joint venture arrangements. The most recent offer, made 11 days ago, was for $3.2 million for a partial partnership arrangement. Cassidy set his pen down. "I'll need time to review these with my client," he said. "Of course," Greta said. The meeting ended 40 minutes after it had begun. Renee left without speaking. Cassidy shook Greta's hand and nodded at Marcus, the nod of a man acknowledging a field he had misread. Marcus rode the elevator down alone. In the lobby, he stopped at the window and looked out at the street. February still, the sky flat and white, the river visible between the buildings, gray and slow and wide. He watched a delivery truck navigate the turn at the corner. He watched a woman in a long coat cross against the light. He thought about his grandfather standing in a field in 1971, holding a clipboard of elevation data, looking at land that everyone else had written off. He thought about how some things were worth looking at long enough. The final settlement was signed on a Wednesday in March. The house went to Renee as part of the agreement, with Marcus retaining all interests in the holding company, the parcels, and the investment accounts attached to the family trust. The retirement accounts were divided by the formula Greta had proposed at the second meeting, which Cassidy had accepted after reviewing the asset structure and understanding that the negotiating position had changed significantly. A transition payment covering 2 years. She did not receive Ryan's solace, who had, according to Derek, relocated to Seattle in late February for a new position at a firm headquartered there. He had not asked her to come. Marcus shook hands with Cassidy in the hallway after the signing. He thanked Greta in the elevator. He drove back to the apartment he had been renting since January, a 2-bedroom unit on the north side. Chosen because it was 6 minutes from Nadia's school and had a garage for the Silverado. He'd been working on the apartment on weekends. New trim in the kitchen. A shelf unit he'd built himself along the living room wall, white oak, 12 linear feet, with a section at Nadia's eye level for her books. He'd refinished the front hallway floor on the second weekend, stripping it back to the original wood and working through 3 grits before sealing it. The floor was the best thing in the apartment now. He was quietly proud of it, though he hadn't mentioned it to anyone. He parked in the garage and sat for a moment with the engine off. The garage smelled like motor oil and sawdust and the cedar of the shelving stock he'd bought the previous weekend. He thought about Saturday. Nadia was coming over Saturday, and he was going to take her to Clifton's house in the afternoon so she could see the yard before the season turned. He got out of the car. He went inside. He hung his jacket on the hook by the door and set his keys in the bowl on the counter, a plain ceramic bowl he'd bought at the hardware store when he first moved in because the counter had felt bare without something to put things in. He stood in the kitchen for a moment in the quiet. The floor caught the afternoon light from the window over the sink. He'd gotten that right, the sealant coat, matte enough not to glare, but enough finish to hold the grain. He looked at it for a moment. The clean run of the boards, the evenness of the color, the work that no one had asked him to explain. Then he went to the stove, filled the percolator, and started dinner. 3 months later, Marcus sat on the back porch of a house on the east side, a wide covered porch he had rebuilt from sagging wood in 3 weekends in late April, replacing the rotted boards one by one, sister joisting where the frame had gone soft, finishing the deck surface with a gray stain that matched the original trim. The house was his now, purchased through the holding company as part of the Eastgate development arrangement with the Lead Investment Group, who had finalized the joint venture in April with Marcus's land as the cornerstone asset. It was a Saturday morning. The coffee in his mug had gone slightly cold. He didn't bother to reheat it. Nadia was in the yard below the porch, in the new grass, chasing a red ball that the wind kept moving. She laughed every time it got away from her. He watched her from the cedar Adirondack chair he'd built himself the previous weekend. Joinery done right, the kind of chair that would still be on this porch in 20 years. He thought about a lot of things that morning and let most of them pass without holding them. He thought about the Silverado in the driveway and the cracked dashboard panel he had still not replaced and probably would not replace. He thought about the elevation data in 1971. He thought about orange chalk on a rebar problem and a note on a foreman's clipboard and the way some things got caught only if you looked at them long enough. He thought about the dress. He thought about the pause before the name. Then he put the mug down on the armrest and called down to Nadia. "Come up and get your jacket," he said. "We're going to Uncle Clifton's." She ran toward the porch steps, already asking if there would be pot roast, already 3 steps ahead of the answer. He pushed himself up from the chair and went inside to find her jacket and his keys. He did not look back at the yard. There was nothing back there that required it. Thanks for staying with that one all the way through. If it hit the way I think it did, go ahead and like the video. It helps more than you know. And I've already picked out 2 more that I think you're really going